Okay, so here is a supplemental video for section 6.5 on proportions. So by definition, a proportion is an equation stating that two ratios or rates are equal. So I just two ratios or rates set equal to each other, essentially. And the way we solve proportions we talked about in class is by using their cross product, where you do A times D and that equals B times C. So that's how we solve our proportions. So here's the book sample problem to look at. 14.1 over C equals 3 over 4. So to solve, we use the cross product. 14.1 times 4 equals 3 times C. And then you get 56.4 equals 3C. Divide both sides by 3. 18.8 equals C. There's your solution. Okay. So we'll just take a look at some of these and then a couple problems from homework. So first problem we'll take a look at is, I don't know, let's say number 7 seems like a good one. Number 7. Number 7 is 1/10 equals m over 12. So the two parts I'm going to multiply together are 1 and 12. And 10 and m. And that's not really showing up. Let me change my pen real quick. So I will have then 1 times 12 equals 10 times m. 1 times 12 equals 10 times m. So I'm going to get 12 equals 10 m. When I simplify that, because 1 times 12 is 12, 10 times m is 10 m. And then to solve for m, divide each side by 10, just like we have earlier on the chapters, in other chapters. Now, if you throw this in the calculator, you get 1.2 equals m, which it does work out nicely. The other thing we can do is we can divide both of these by 2, and we'll get 6 over 5, or 1 1/5 equals to m. And personally, I'm okay with either answer. It doesn't matter to me what you decide to go with. I do not prefer this in general, because if it repeats, we have to tell it that it repeats. But in this case, it did terminate to 1.2, so that would be okay. The other thing the book does is it does proportion problems that are word problems, which we're going to need quite a few of these throughout the class to work through. So just to look at one, and I'll actually look at one through the homework. So the key to solving a word problem with proportions is just setting up the proper proportion. So here's our problem with Lori. Lori drove 232 miles in 5 hours. At this rate, how long will it take her to drive 580 miles? Now, the book goes through two different ways to do this. They just set up one proportion of 232 to 5 equals 580 to h, or 232 to 580 equals 5 to h. The thing they kind of are leaving out of here is that with a proportion, what's most important is using your units. So, for instance, this is miles, this is miles. So 232 has to correspond to 580, because those are the two units of the same. Hours is what I know, and I'm looking for how long will it take her. That's also hours. So those two have to correspond. And they can correspond in two different ways. I could put miles on top, which means I have to put miles on top over here. So 232 to 580, and then hours to hours in the bottom. So this is miles. This then is hours. Or what the book decided to do on the second way is they put miles over miles equals hours over hours. That's okay to do as well, as long as if I put the 232 on top, I put its corresponding time with it on top as well. So 232 equals over some distance equals 5 over some time. Doesn't matter which way you set it up. The key is that the corresponding parts work together. And what you find is when you cross multiply, we get 5 times 580 over here. This one here, we still get 5 times 580. It's just in a different order. We get 232 times h, 232 times h. I still get the same equation. 232h equals 2900. 232h equals 2900. Divide both sides by 232. This one you could throw into a calculator to get the approximation at 12.5. Okay, so let's look at a word problem then. Good word problem. Rainfall. The record for the most... Oh, sorry, pull this up here. So this is 24 from homework. So rainfall. The record for the most amount of rain in the shortest amount of time in the United States was 12 inches in 42 minutes. how much rain fell in 15 minutes and in 28 minutes. So whenever you start a problem like this, you have to make a decision. Are you going to do rain to rain, and then which would be inches equals time to time, or inches to time equals inches to time? To me, it doesn't really honestly matter. I'll do inches to time just because of the fact that, I don't know, I just feel like doing it that way. So I know it was 12 inches in 42 minutes. So I'm going to put 12 inches over 42 minutes. The question for part 1 is, how much would I expect to have in 15 minutes? So that means x inches over 15 minutes. Now, one thing about proportions that didn't pop up in the previous problem is, if this fraction reduces here, reduce it. It makes your arithmetic so much easier to do. So 12 and 42 are both divisible by 6. I'm going to make this 2 over 7 equals x over 15. Because 12 divided by 6 is 2, 42 divided by 6 is 7. And now it's a lot easier to work to do. So I cross multiply to solve. 7 times x equals 2 times 15, meaning 7x equals 30. Divide by 7, x equals 30 over 7. That's not any good for us though, because we're talking inches. Remember, that's what we're looking for solving for, is x inches over 15 minutes. So let's make this a mixed number. It's actually 4 2/7 inches in 15 minutes. Or you could throw it into the calculator and get a decimal approximation. The second thing they want us to do is, what about in 28 minutes? Okay. So same exact process. 12 inches in 42 minutes equals x inches in 28 minutes. Again, if I reduce this, it makes it a lot easier to do. Both those are divisible by 6, so I'm going to get, if I reduce that, I'm going to get 2 over 7 equals x over 28. Now cross multiply 2 times 28, 7 times x. Okay. 2 times 28 is 56. 7 times x is 7x. Divide by 7. This one divides out nicely. 8 inches. So we should get 8 inches of rain in 28 minutes if it's raining at this rate, which is, again, the fastest ever known. Okay. Now the last problem we'll look at is problem 34 from homework, which is another proportion problem, but this one's a little more algebraic. There's no word problem here, it's just cross multiply and solve. So I'm going to cross multiply these two guys. The difference is, when I do this, I'm going to have 24 times 15, but then I'm going to have 8 times the quantity x minus 18. That parentheses a little nicer. So I have 24 times 15, 8 times x minus 18. So multiply those two together, I end up getting 360. Okay. I'll have to distribute now, and that's where the mistake comes into play at, is when you're doing this, especially if you're just trying to do it all in your head, not writing any work down, you'll just do 8 times x. But it's also 8 times 18. So I'm going to get then 8x minus 144. And now to solve, I'll have to add 144 to both sides. That gives me 404 equals 8x. Now I'll divide by 8. And what that ends up being is 50.5. So 50.5. Or, I prefer as a fraction, but I'm assuming most of you probably would throw that in your calculator if you weren't working through the long division. 50.5 is a better answer because it's a fraction. We always kind of prefer fractions, but 50.5 is the same thing. Okay, and that's the video for this section.